morning, everybody. Jim, your safety officer, and Brandon Christensen from Engine 202 are here today. We want to talk about CNG hazards and ways we can better effectively manage this problem, keeping us safe and also servicing the citizens that we swore oaths to protect. Brandon had the last complex CNG fire in our system, in our city, recently. I just want to talk a little bit about what he saw, his actions he took, and then we're going to go through this truck, identify some hazards and ways we can make it safe and manage our problems a little bit better. So, Brando, you went on scene in your first due, right?
Yep.
What'd you have when you got there?
So right at shift change, we got kicked out for a single unit vehicle fire. As we exited the apparatus bays, our alarm room, you basically notified that it's a CNG pickup truck, and then they changed it to a garbage truck. Once we confirmed it was a CNG City of Mesa garbage truck, went ahead and added a battalion chief and a hazmat unit to the call. En route, basically it was kind of coming up with the game plan with our back seat and also the engineer. We kind of routed ourselves so that we kind of were able to stage on a plug. And also kind of told them like, hey, we're gonna give this a little bit more distance. We're gonna pull a 200-foot cross lay versus our traditional front bumper. When we showed up, we had a working fire in kind of the hopper area back behind the cab. We didn't have accountability on the driver right away, so I asked one of my firefighters, after they packed out, to go clear the cab and get a primary on it real quick while the other firefighter was pulling a hand line. From the get-go, it seemed like a pretty routine call. It was an offensive fire for us. While they were doing that, I was walking past doing a 360 when I noticed that the garbage truck driver was actually about 2 houses to the east, kind of hiding behind some vehicles. I asked him if he had secured the gas. He had said no. When I turned around, I kind of noticed that the fire had doubled in size. I asked him to walk with me and show me exactly where the shutoff valves were, just so we kind of expedite the process. Right about when we got next to the truck, there was a pretty loud explosion. The garbage truck driver, he kind of peeled off. I looked around, the fire intensified. Got accountability on both my firefighters, made sure that they were okay. We started spraying water on like the bottom half of the truck. Asked my other firefighter to go ahead and pull a second line to start protecting the exposure directly to the north. Derek Weir is my engineer for the morning. He went ahead and secured a water supply. East deputy showed up shortly thereafter and basically let them know what we had. Once the explosion happened, I balanced it to a 3-in-1 just since we did have the direct exposures. Then we put a deck gun into service just for exposure protection and started the evacuation process.
Outstanding. When Brandon went on scene, they had a hydraulic fire, and we'll identify these locations here shortly when we walk around the vehicle. We're very common. We're going to see a cab fire, we're going to see a hydraulic fire, we're going to see a brake fire, or we're going to see a contents fire in the box. Those are offensive firefights, right? We protect life safety, quick primaries, but we want to pull hoses and engage in that firefight to stop the fires from progressing to where the cylinders are. But what we want to delineate is once fire is directly impinging on our cylinders, that's the fire we're going to back off, protect exposures, and let the fire event happen. And we'll talk through some of the hazards with the thermally regulated pressure relief devices and the cylinders and the catastrophic failure that ensues. So I can't say enough. Brandon and his crew made excellent decisions that day. What they ended up having was a ruptured fuel line fire. It looked very similar to a PRD firing off, right? We had very impressive flames coming off, and we'll have some photos and videos attached to this so you guys can see it. But their actions were spot on that day until they couldn't account for the variable of the ruptured fuel line. And again, it's the same tactic. If we have a ruptured fuel line or a leak at the tank that ignites, we're still going to apply the same logic. We are defensive now, and we're going to let that fire event happen. So let's go through and walk through some of the hazards with these vehicles. Okay, let's talk about some of the hazards specific to our fleet. We'll also cover some of the common commercial hazards that we have that move through our city with any CNG vehicle. As you can see with our City of Mesa folks, we're proud of it. We badge appropriately, right? Big banner on the side of the truck. But the hazard we have is with Department of Transportation regulations, they only require 1 6-inch blue diamond CNG decal on the rear bumper of this vehicle. Now, what's the likelihood we're going to see that in the heat of battle, right? Or has fire already impinged on it and burned it off? So the success and failure of this operation is to be able to recognize the potential for CNG and to be able to identify where those tanks and the vent locations are located at. I mentioned we're going to commonly have a cab fire. Most of those are going to be engaged and managed with the driver and his dry chem extinguisher. If that gets away from them, they're obviously going to evacuate to a safe location, and they're going to call 911 and wait for us to respond. One of the most common culprits is our hydraulic lines here. Once those rupture, it's a very impressive fireball. But again, we don't have direct flame impingement of our cylinders where they're located on the top of the cab. As we move further down the vehicle, this is our fuel management module, right? This is where we can secure this quarter turn valve without grease and debris in there. It's a red valve. When we secure that, we are shutting down fuel from the vehicle to the motor, right? It's a good, safe way for us to render this vehicle a safe state. The other gauges in there, one's the high pressure side, one's the low pressure side. We're running 3,600 PSI on the high pressure, and we're taking that down to 125 PSI on the low pressure side. Low pressure is the usage side for the motor of this vehicle. The other valve in there is a fuel fill and one for offloading. That is technical, that's way beyond us, our scope of practice, and as well as our hazmat teams. Those are going to be true professionals that will come out and offload these tanks. The next common fire we're going to see is going to be brake fires. I know we don't see those very frequently, but it is very common in commercial vehicles, especially over highways, to heat up these brakes and cause a brake fire that usually extends to a tire fire. Again, look at your training bulletins that we've sent out and recognize the hazards in large diameter tire fires, right? The last type of fire we're going to have, and a lot of these are going to be caused by the contents, what we're throwing away, right? But we end up with contents fires in the box. A lot of times that's lithium ion fires caused now. They're throwing them away at the residential level. They're being crushed in here, resulting in a fire in the box. This is the hard one for us to discern if we have direct flame impingement, because it might be masked by the covers of the CNG cylinders up on the roof, or we might not be able to see where the fire is actually contacting and touching those cylinders. So this is going to be one we're highly suspect. I forgot to mention, folks, we are about at 99% CNG for our garbage trucks. The last couple diesels are being decommissioned. All of our flatbed roll-offs also have CNG, and we're also moving into the CNG in the passenger truck capacities within our city fleet here. So let's talk a little bit about where our cylinders might be. On 100% of our garbage trucks, they're all located up on top in those big coffins, okay? They also can be, if we think of waste management and other commercial vendors, they can be in this clamshell, right? They're going to be stacked up horizontally in this tire back into the vehicle here. Last place they will be is either in a saddle tank configuration down here or vertically stacked behind the cab. All of which are very common CNG locations, right? But for us, luckily, everything is up on top of the rig. Emergency shutoff right here. All of our garbage trucks have this shutoff here. Again, we secure that, we stop the flow of fuel from the cylinder to the motor. It still doesn't remedy the fact if we have direct flame impingement on those cylinders. What we have to let happen up there is the thermally regulated pressure relief device. It's like a frangible disc. It has to burn away. That happens at 200 to 225 degrees. Once that disc is burned away, the contents of that cylinder is going to evacuate. Could take upwards of 30 minutes, okay? If we don't have an issue with direct flame impingement, certainly securing the fuel at the fuel management module or back here at the emergency disconnect, that will remedy and render this truck safe, and we can actively engage in that offensive firefight. Engine 2, any questions from you? Do you feel better prepared to manage this fire problem right now? Okay, right on. What our drivers are going to do for us, when they recognize a fire, they're going to try to get to a safe location, right? Parking lot, field, could be a cul-de-sac, somewhere where they can dump this load, and they want to move the vehicle away from there because what they're worried about is damaging their fleet. They always stay somewhere relatively close to the vehicle. Depending on the scope of the fire and their perception of where hazard line would be, they may be further away, but the driver's always going to be somewhere close for us. So I want to thank Engine 2 for coming out and helping us go through here, for Brandon telling his story. This problem, folks, keeps recreating itself. We dealt with the tragic injuries in LA, but since then we've had at least 3 across this nation. It's because firefighters intuitively want to put water on fire, and almost every time that's a successful plan. except for when we're dealing with CNG hazards. So that's the one we want to slow down, right? Get a good size up, identify the type of fuel, and pick your appropriate tactics to manage your problem. But it's going to be predicated on the success or failure of being able to identify the fuel type for our vehicles here. So thank you all very much. I appreciate all your time. Have a good day. Be safe.